Welcome back, folks, to another budget gem or budget bust. Today I've got an amplifier that has been requested quite a bit ever since they released it. This is the NVX VAD 1701 amplifier. NVX, for those of you who don't know, is the house brand of Sonic Electronix, and they usually do their own dyno tests, which is why I don't normally put a lot of NVX stuff, even though it's great budget stuff, on the channel, because they've already done it. And since pretty much every dyno acts the same, there really wasn't a point for me. A lot of people have been happy with NVX, so why did I decide to test this one? Well, quite simply, because there was a little bit of controversy, at least people online, the ones that are really interested in conspiracy theory, with NVX's latest dyno on Sonic's homepage. And that is where they only tested dynamically how this amp performed. Normally they run the full battery test, certified, uncertified, dynamic, and on this one they only ran dynamic, which led people to start speculating off the bat they didn't show it because it failed. And really there could be lots of reasons why they didn't show the whole thing. One could be the amount of time they want to dedicate towards the video. They typically do 2-3 minute long videos, and their video is still 2-3 minutes long. Other thing could just be power supply. Most of their dynos in the past have been sub 1,000 watts, and I've seen their power supply in their videos, and it looks like they're just doing 3 14-volt batteries when they do their testing. From experience, if you're doing a certified or an uncertified test with only 3 14-volt batteries, your voltage will drop. And I imagine on their battery, if they're running 3, they could be dropping in the low 13s. And if they do miss their ratings at the low 13s, it's not going to look good for them, especially when they're rated at 14.4. So maybe they left it out for that. I don't know. But here's what I do know. I've got 13 14-volt batteries. I have 3 100 amp power supplies, each providing 100 amp piece. I can run this amp. So we're going to find out for sure today what this amp actually does. Is it overrated, underrated? Who knows? So we're going to jump right in. We're going to unbox this bad boy, and then we're going to strap it up and we're going to find out. So let's just start by finding out what's in the box. Okay, opening her up. First thing we get is our owner's manual. Let's go and find out what the specs are in here. Online it looked like it was 750 watts at 4 ohms, 1300 at 2, and 1700 at 1. On the box it's 750 at 4, 1300 at 2, 1700 watts at 1, just like it is online. Make sure there's no differences here in the owner's manual. Let's see. Here we go. And in the owner's manual for power specs, we get 1700 by 1, 1350 at 2, and 800 watts at 4 ohms. And that's at a less than 3% total harmonic distortion. So not quite 1% that we normally see. Next in here we have a bass knob cable. So looks like we're going to get a bass knob. Some Allen keys and screws. Nice, not El Cheapo bass knob. There's no power light or indicator light on here, but decent potentiometer, and it's made of metal. And last but not least, one NVX amplifier. Da-da-da! So pretty heavy for something this small. But let's check out the sides. Along this side of the amplifier, we find our power and ground input terminals, as well as our speaker output terminals, and there is some good and some bad here. Let's start with the bad. Okay, so this is a 1700 watt amplifier, and I really think anything over 13 to 1500 watts really needs to be a 1 out input for power and ground. NVX on this case said, well, how about 4 gauge? I mean, I really don't want to use 4 gauge on anything above 120 amps, especially on a long run to your battery. So, at 1700 watts, I mean, you could be looking at drawing close to 200 amps out of this thing. So this really isn't sufficient. I mean, it'll be fine on my test bench because I'm going to run, 2-aught welding cable and a couple of different runs and even some 4-aught from my batteries to a distribution block down to 4 gauge reduced, which is fine because I'm only going to run about 12 inches. If you're in a power sport situation, if you're on a boat, if you're on a side-by-side or one of these other power sport vehicles where you're going to have a very, very short run to your battery, then 4 gauge is fine. 4 gauge OFC, that is, not CCA. So a little bit of a disappointment for the car people. One's running all the way back 16 to 20 feet to the batteries of their vehicle. 4 gauge just ain't going to cut it with an amp this size. On the positive side, and very much overkill, we have 4 gauge speaker outputs. I don't know if it's just lazy, like what kind of input should we put on this thing? I don't know, same as the, let's put speaker outputs the same as the power inputs, that'll do it. So, I mean, huge speaker outputs, tiny power inputs. Also too, notice the fan. You have a nice 12 volt computer style fan there. So very nice, especially for an amp this size that's going to be producing this wattage. You're really going to want to keep it cool. Along this side of the amplifier, we find all of our settings as well as our RCA inputs and outputs. Yes, you do get a pair of ins and outs for RCAs. No high level adapter though, so you are going to have to use RCAs for this amp. You have gain control, phase from 0 to 180 degrees, just a switch. You have your low pass filter from 50 hertz to 250 hertz, a subsonic filter from 10 hertz to 55 hertz. You have a adjustable bass frequency for your bass boost. If you're going to use it, at least it's adjustable. And of course your bass boost from 0 to 12 dBs. I still recommend, even with the adjustable bass frequency, that you please leave off bass boost and just make sure your gains are set up properly from the beginning. You do have a remote bass knob. There's the input for that, and it is the telephone cord style, so it'll be nice and snug into the amplifier. And lastly, our power and protect light. Okay, opening her up. Now when you do open these up, one thing I should mention, they are all Allen keys. They're not or Allen screws, I should say. And you have to take the side end cap off to do it. So a little bit more involved than normal. Inside here, this is your Brazilian style. That's what it more commonly known as now, but it's really a full bridge amplifier design. It's also coated for marine use. That's why, if you can kind of see in here, that's why it's a little bit glossier than normal. There is a coating, probably a little bit hard for you folks to see at home. Main caps in here are 3300 microfarad, 63 volt, 105 degrees from a company called Osca. So your wrestling fans, it's by the Empress of Tomorrow, the female wrestler there. Everything seems seated well. This has got no movement at all. Everything seems nice and polished up here, just like you would expect from a decently made amplifier. Only thing I could say on the coating that's supposed to make it marine certified, it only goes back so far. It doesn't get to where the pots and everything are like that for potentiometers. So it does cut off, doesn't cover the whole amp. So I would have liked to see that on there, maybe a little bit thicker, but in all likelihood, unless you're like dunking this thing in underwater, you should be fine. But it does seem nicely constructed. Okay, nothing left to do here but to strap up the NVX 1701 amplifier up to our trusty amp dyno and find out just how much power this tiny amplifier actually produces. Are we really going to get 1700 watts out of this? I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, final thoughts here on the NVX VAD 1701 amplifier. Let's just get this over with right off the bat. Yes, we have a budget gem of an amplifier. As you saw, well, the amp did stumble a little bit on the certified tests. The owner's manual told me that was going to happen because they were really at 3% or under THD, and the dyno cuts off at 1% THD on the certified test. But we didn't miss by a lot on any of those numbers, and we well exceeded the numbers uncertified and dynamically. If you remember, uncertified, we got over 800 watts at 4 ohms, over 1400 watts at 2 ohms, and almost 1900 watts at 1 ohm. And of course, certified, we got 1660, I think, at 1 ohm, but that was around 14.1 volts. You voltage correct that to 14.4, and you're almost right there at 1700 watts, if not exactly on. So it is fairly accurately rated. Now, those are the good sides of the amp. Some of the downsides, which I mentioned earlier about the 4-gauge power and ground, the fan noise that comes on this, it is noticeable. It sounds like one of my power supplies going, or for you at home that have never heard my power supplies, like a 1990s computer fan going off. It just has that hum, that like noise. And so if it's going to be in the main cabin with you of your car, you may not love it. If you're in a power sports environment, which is again where I think they really were going for on this amp, because that market for 12 volt electronics is exploding. In that case, perfect. You won't notice it. Your engines are going to be so damn loud, you're not going to ever even notice a hum coming off this thing, and your ambient noise is going to be so loud you'll never notice it. So not really a big deal for those folks. So Whether or not it makes your shopping list is really going to depend upon your needs. Again, if you're power sports, absolutely include this on your list. If you're a guy who's planning on competing with SQology anytime soon, not your amp. Okay, not to say it's a bad amp, but I mean, because obviously it's a gem, but like I said, it has some drawbacks with it. And again, if you're not wanting to invest in reducers, you're not willing to invest in a distribution block, these 4-gauge terminals could be a problem for you. But you overcome all those. It's a really nice amp, really compact. Again, solid job once again by NVX. So that's it for me, folks. I enjoyed testing this one. Until next time, I have got a lot more amps to test. See you soon.